My name is Lowel P, and I want to talk about my faith journey,
Okay.
and very much leading characters in that is the Holy Spirit and my mother. I was born in 1929. If you know your history, that was the year of the crash of the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were left, penniless, really. I was born in November. My father died in January, the following January, of pneumonia, which was a very common killer in those years. So my mother and my three older sisters and older brother and I moved to a little village north of St. Paul. And the Holy Spirit, I think, was guiding her because she bought a house right across from a family that were really a group of people who were dedicated to helping us. They knew my mother's situation with 5 children, youngest me, just a couple months old. So that was very important in my life. My mother's faith was so strong, even though her situation was what it was. And I mentioned the Depression because during that time, there were no jobs. And this community was about 50 miles north of St. Paul. And the Great Northern Railroad ran through it on its way to Duluth. And a lot of the men looking for work would ride the rails, they called it. And it got known, I guess, because they would show up at our home for a meal, for some food. And my mother, even though she was struggling to feed her own flock, never turned any of these men down. And I remember her saying one time, you never know when it's Jesus who is knocking. That was how strong her faith was. She was willing to share the little that she had. She saw to it that we were taken care of. My 3 older sisters, we all worked. We did all kinds of jobs. 3 older sisters went through nurses training, became RNs. And I think this was during the end of the war, World War II. And there was a cadet corps of nurses. And they were able to sign up for that, which helped them get uniforms and and a stipend to help them live, really. So my brother and I were then at home. The 3 older girls were married. I was a senior in high school when the superintendent came to myself and another student, wanted us to take a little test for a banking system. I took it. It was a little harder than 2 + 2, as I recall, but anyway, it met their expectations, and I was placed in a bank down in Northfield, Minnesota. You may or may not know, Northfield has 2 colleges. One of them is St. Olaf, and the other is Carleton. So I worked in the bank for about a year, and the assistant cashier, her father was a religion professor at St. Olaf. And he arranged for me to interview the head of the finance, the treasurer of the college, which I did. And I was offered a position in the business office while going to school. And I think when I think about it, and the Holy Spirit sort of being on my shoulder, having me do that little test, get placed down in Northfield, Minnesota in a bank. I didn't have any money, nor did my mother, to send me to college. But then to get the opportunity to go to St. Olaf, which I did for 4 years, and was graduated from there, cum laude. And shortly after I graduated from St. Olaf, the Korean War was on. That started in 1950. So I was drafted, went through basic training, and thought I was going to go to Europe. I ended up in Korea. And I was in an artillery battalion. Never had any training in artillery. I had radio training. So there I was in a artillery battalion putting together shells with powder and that so they could be shot out of the cannons. I'm sure the Holy Spirit again was in that fire pit with me because, again, I had no training in this, and why I didn't blow up the whole place, I was never quite sure, except that God was watching over me. I was there about 6 months before the truce. I got there in January of '53, and the truce was signed in July of '53. 35,000 American soldiers were killed during that war. It's sort of been called the Forgotten War. People didn't pay too much attention to it. But we were supporting the infantry of the front line. And so we had we were opposed primarily to the Chinese who came in during that war. And they were very good with their mortars, so we had to be careful about where we were and which side of the mountain we were living on. At any rate, we got through that, came home, and met my future wife in a blind date. She was with a classmate of mine from St. Olaf. I was with a nursing classmate of hers. But when I got back from Korea, I had my eye sorted the direction of Mona. And next year, in May, we will have been married 60 years. Yeah. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. The children, the oldest is a physician. Our daughter is an interior designer. And our youngest son is an attorney. So they've all done fairly well. And the 5 grandchildren are in the process of growing up. The first one graduated from CU, and he was on the track team there. So as I look back on my life and the faith that my mother had, considering her circumstances, she entrusted in me a belief that if you live with God, you're going to be okay. And you can do things that perhaps you never thought you could do. My goal now is to attempt to convey that, and my wife too, Mona, both of us, to convey, especially to our grandchildren, the importance of having a faith and believing in God, the Holy Spirit. And I guess that's the basis of my story, is being fortunate to have the Holy Spirit watching over me and a mother who just imbued me with a strong belief in God.
Thank you so much.